All right, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our site visit to the Aranda Belconnen Fire Station just then. Are there any questions with that? So just to clarify, what you now know is that the structure of ambulance stations and fire stations are very, very similar. The differences lie in the scale and the provision of services there, and also in the culture, the organizational culture between the fire brigade and the ambulance service. All right. So for this studio, what we're going to be doing is an ambulance station rather than the fire station. But of course, there's things in the fire station that can inform your design as well. So that's why with the case studies, you're looking at both fire stations and ambulance stations. Okay, so one of the things to do with a case study is for you to compare what makes an ambulance station and what makes a fire station. So it's some of the case study buildings are actually quite large, and what you then need to do is to compare that against the brief that you've been given. Okay, which is part of the thing. What I want you guys to do is to understand the scale of the things. All right. So what you saw today, we all went to the ambulance station. No one went in the ambulance station? Did we all go in the ambulance station? Yes? God almighty, it's like getting blood out of a stone. Okay, so I think the main thing that was explained to us by Karen, the ambulance officer, is that ambulance stations are much more homely, are much more domestic, and fire stations are much more institutional, army-like, if you like. And you can see that with the ranks as well. The fire brigade people tend to have military-type ranks, whereas the ambulance people are much more without hierarchy, have much less hierarchy. So the main thing here in terms of Design Studio 2.2 is that it leads on from Design Studio 2.1. All right, so in Design Studio 2.1, you had a very small dwelling and a contemplation area. So each Design Studio builds up in scale. So for 2.2, for this semester, we're going to be doing an ambulance station. It has very specific programmatic relationships, as you can see from the brief, but it is also a little bit bigger than what you did last semester. All right, so in terms of the fire station that we saw, the fire station is much more going to be something that you might do in Design 3.1 next year. Okay, so that's the difference. That's where it sits in this. So what we're trying to do really here is a kind of house where people also work in. All right. You'll see that there were only 2 ambulance crews there at the ambulance station, but for the brief, we'll be working on 3 ambulance crews. So you can imagine that each of the ambulance bays will have an ambulance in it. Any questions? Okay, so what I want to do today is just to go through that a little bit more in terms of your functional brief analysis. So I've talked about the case study and we've got the site visit. Just with the case study, we're not looking for drawings to scale necessarily. What we're looking for is more diagrams such as this one, just to show us how the space is actually divided up. All right. So if you have plans, it will make it easier for you to do this. But also, don't forget, you can. All I want is a spatial distribution, so you can use quite coarse things such as Google Earth aerial photographs and the like. Okay, are we all going good with our case studies? Remember that there are many different kinds of sources, and text sources are often very explanatory. They describe what's going on. So if you don't have a plan, but you have a good description of the building and how it's used, as well as an aerial photograph, you can probably work it out. Google Street View, let's not forget Google Street View as well. Okay, so in terms of the brief, what we have here is basically 3 different areas and a total of 20 rooms, and I think you saw all those rooms in the ambulance station. So although this provision here looks like a lot of things, when you're in it, it doesn't actually feel that big, right? It's not that complicated. Okay, so that's the ambulance station brief is what we are trying to follow. And as Karen and Mark said, there's many ways to design these things, so you don't necessarily have to follow the layout of the Aranda ambulance station. You just need to understand the key concepts behind it. So what I want you guys to do is to do a return brief, and everybody had started work on their case study, but not on the return brief. So I thought it might be an idea just to show you guys what a return brief actually looks like. Now, if I go over here, so this is a return brief from last year's Design Studio 3.1. So what you need to remember is that what's happening? It's not wanting to. Yes, that's not helpful, is it? Close. Oopsies. Okay, here we go. So Control L. Okay. So with a return brief, sorry everyone, it's spazzing out. Okay, here we go. Maybe it's a big file. Okay, so what you can see here is last year's Design Studio, it was basically we were doing a library and a theater complex in 3.1. So what you can see here is that what this student has done is that they have actually done all the main areas into these boxes. So essentially what they've done is they've taken the area of the space and they've turned it into a square. So they've done a square root of the area, which has given them the 2 equal sides. And then what you can see is that they've got the 3 different colors of the 3 different programs that were in the library. And then they've also given them heights. Okay, so there's many ways to do this. This is only one way to do this. You could choose to do this by making a model. You could choose to do this something like this. Or this is actually in perspective, but it's fine for it just to be in axonometric and so on and so forth. Now, so this diagram up here actually gives you an idea as to how big everything is. And then the next thing that they've done here is that they've actually done a proximity diagram. So what they've done is all the spaces that need to be near each other, they've linked with a line so they can see how everything relates to each other. Okay, so this is what a return brief is. Usually we get a brief, which is just a list of numbers like I've given you. And what the architect does is to see what the spatial implications of that brief is. And that design study is actually called a return brief. Okay, any questions on that? So basically what you need to do with your return brief is really to try and turn into space what is written down in the brief. Okay, turn into volume what is written down in the brief. Yes, the question.
The first drawing the diagrams, the first part of the diagrams, not the proximity. Can you just go through that again?
Okay, so to go through it again, this diagram here, Kerry? This diagram here, Kerry?
Yeah.
Okay, so what this is they've taken each of the spaces and they've taken each of the areas and they've turned that area into a square. Okay, so what they've done is to turn an area into a square. So let's say we've got here the lounge area is 25 square meters. How you turn that into a square is you do the square root of 25 meters, which means which will give you 5. So it's a square that is 5 on one side and 5 on the other side. right? So if you multiply them together, 5 by 5 gives you the area that you started off with. All right. So it's something that is drawn to scale as a 2D and a 3D thing, so you know how big it is in terms of its footprint and also how tall it needs to be. So you know that the ambulance bays need to be actually taller than the inside spaces. So this is why this kind of program breakdown is important. Okay, so are we clear on what's required for the return brief? Yes.
So the spaces, do we like create our own layout of how?
Okay, so the question is, do you create a layout? I would say no for now. I would actually group them into bigger spaces, and then the actual specifics of those spaces you would deal with later. For example, there's supposed to be 6 bedrooms of 13 square meters in our brief. So what I would do is I would get the total area of all of that. So 6 by 13, which is 84 square meters, and then I would add maybe 20% for circulation, so another 20. So I would have an area of about 100 square meters, and I would make my box that big, right? Just for now, just to see how big that all the bedrooms are together. And then later we can get into finer detail as we move through it. Okay, so the idea of this is not to have too much detail. So we don't need to be designing individual bathrooms. We just need to be designing the kind of spaces where the bathrooms will actually go into. Understood? Yes.
Where we do this, is it you have to have a computer or can it be hand-drawn or?
Okay, I've not made any stipulation for the format. You can draw it by hand, you can draw it in the computer. The end format will be A3. This will not be presented. This will just be something that you load up onto Moodle, your A3 document that you load up to Moodle with all of these things on it. Okay? And of course, the idea here is that it's due in week 8. So what you need to do is you need to have a go at it, and then bring it to show us next week so that we can give you some feedback as to how you're going. And also, I'm available on Fridays as well, Friday afternoons, if you want to bring me something in between class or you want to get a head start. So it is slightly compressed, right? It is a compressed time frame, so you guys need to have a red hot go at the site analysis and the return brief and the case study, and bring all your work to studio next Tuesday. Or this Friday, if you get a bit of a head start, because it will be due the week after next. Okay?
So this is all on what we saw today or our own program?
This is on our own program, Kerry. Okay? So today's one was really a case study that we all share. So we get the shared experience of a case study. And what we're doing here is a functional brief for the project that we are going to be doing. Okay? So really, if we go back to this, so that's the return brief, which is 1A and 1B. The case study for the emergency services building I've already spoken about. And the other thing I'd like to talk about today is the site analysis. Okay, so what you will see on Moodle is that I have. Let me get to my Moodle. Where is my Moodle? Okay, so what you will see on the Moodle site. Under site information, which is in week 5, yeah, so week 5, under site information, you see there that I have put in these six documents. All right. So what I want to do is to go through them to show you what we're doing in this class. So our site is going to be on the Federal Highway at the corner of Old Station Well Road. Okay, so let me show you what I've given you here. So this is basically a drawing that I've done to show you where the site is. So we've got the Federal Highway here. We've got Old Well Station Road here. This is the new Canberra Park Resort, and this is where Epic is. And I'll show you the aerial photographs and how to get there shortly. So our site is actually supposed to be part of this Canberra Park Resort facility, but I'm pretending that I'm taking a corner off of that to be used for our design purposes. Okay, so this is 1 to 1000 at A3. If you print it out, please print out actual size, and it will come out to scale. So that's the first thing that's on there. The other thing that you'll find on there is another drawing which I've done, where I've drawn contours over it. All right, and these contours are half-meter contours. So you'll be able to get an idea as to what the contours are over the site. So then our site is actually over here. Let me. So you can see on here that. So this is the corner here. So you can see on here that I've actually gone and hand drawn all of these contours in there, and so you guys might well have to change this into a digital format to be able to use it, or trace it over by hand, depending on how you actually want to use it. But it actually gives you an idea as to the heights between the road, the Federal Highway, which is down here. You can't see that, can you? The Federal Highway and the site. So basically, from the Federal Highway up to the site, you've got about 1.5 meters. So this will be interesting for us in terms of how we then get our ambulances in and out of the Federal Highway. Going back to here as well, what I've also got there is that I've got a series of aerial photographs at different scales, and you can see the scale in the title of the aerial photograph. So this is the thing that I drew the contours on and so forth at 1 to 1000. The next one is 1 to 2000. So you can start to see this whole sort of hotel thing, Epic here, and the houses up here in Hackett or Downer or whatever it is. And then further out, we've got 1 to 5,000, so you get a better idea. You can see the sort of Epic markets are here, and you get the two horse tracks over here, and the suburbs of Canberra down here. So this is the Federal Highway that goes up to Sydney, and then this is the road that goes up to Gungahlin through Mitchell. And then finally, an even bigger one at 1 to 10,000 scale, which actually shows you the youth detention centre here and the Mitchell industrial area, as well as the racetrack and Hackett Downer and so on and so forth. Okay, so those are there for you to have a look at. I would draw your attention to the address of the site, which is actually part of 26 Old Well Station Road. Okay. Now, all of these aerial photographs I've got from the ACT mapping service, and I'll now show you how to get there. So what you do is you go to actmapi.act.gov.au. Okay. And just for your information, if you have case studies in Canberra, if your case studies are in Canberra, this is the most up-to-date aerial photographs you will get on Canberra. It's much more up-to-date than Google Maps, okay, than Google Earth. So if you have a case study in Canberra, this is the one to go to. So what you need to do then is to click on the top left, the basic aerial mapping service, and it will give you once it loads up, it will give you a choice as to what you need. I'm sorry everyone, it's going to take a little while to load up. Any questions so far? And then what you can do with this is all the different layers that you need to do your site analysis for are going to be there. Okay, so let me just pull that out. So what I basically asked for is the topographical features of the sites and the surrounds. Right, topographical means the shape of the land, and things like lakes and rivers and what have you. And of course, you now have the contour map to be able to work out the flora of the site and surrounds, which you'll be able to get from these maps. The existing vehicular and pedestrian circulation, which of course you can see on the aerials, like here. And then the climatic conditions of the sites and surrounds. North is presumed to be up with all these maps, so you can tell me where the sun comes from. You can go and research where the rain comes from in Canberra, where the wind comes from in summer, where the wind comes from in winter, and so on and so forth. And all of those things need to be dealt with as well. And then number 5 is I want the existing buildings on the site and surrounds, their heights, forms, uses, and so forth. And you get a plan here as to what everything is. But you don't forget that you will also have to go out onto sites and take photographs of all of these things, which I will show you how that works in just a minute. Okay? So what you do here is you go, I want to search blocks. And then search block by street address, and then the street address is 26 Old Well Station Road. Of course, you don't need to put in what suburb it's in, because it seems that in Canberra, none of the roads share names. So every road has its own Every road has its own name, so there's no 2 roads that have the same name. So now you can see where it is. I think if you click into it, it will zoom into that. Okay, so that's actually what we've got there, right? So that actually gives us our site there. So you can see from here, there's a whole stack of. So you can see that our site is actually this yellow bit, and what I'm doing is cutting off a corner on there for use for this design studio. Yeah. And then you have all sorts of details about the land and so on and so forth, which go up and down there. So this is really more about a town planning designation. Don't worry about the zoning. I'm giving you all permission to put an ambulance station there. Okay. So if we go down to, this, let me see. If we go down here now, then you can actually see that we can zoom right into the thing, and you can see basically what all the buildings are and all the property boundaries and what have you, okay, which is very handy to tell you what you need to look at. But for the heights of the buildings and what have you, you need to go out there and have a look at it. In the site analysis, I have asked for existing buildings on the site and surrounds, heights and forms, and etc., etc. Okay, now of course the next question is, how much do you do? Do you do something like this much? Or do you do something like this much? Or do you do something like this much? Okay, so there's no end to this. So what I suggest is you do an area that covers the site and maybe a little bit more. So perhaps something to this area. Okay. So the site there we have in yellow, and the red might be the parts that cover all the bits and pieces that we need. All right, so what I'll now show you is some examples from last year in 3.1. Any questions so far? No questions? All right, so now, first thing you have to remember is 3.1 was a site in the city. So the site was much denser, it had a lot more buildings around it, and so on and so forth. And so it was a different kettle of fish. These drawings were all at A1. so the drawings were scaled to suit A1. All right, but the kind of information you need to have on it is pretty much what you see here. Let me try the Control L again. Okay, so this is Chloe's A1 panel here. So what she's done is each of these drawings actually analyze a different set of things, and they also come in different scales. So you'll need to decide what scale you want to do each of these 6 categories in, and maybe you might want to have an overall one as well. And what you can also see with Chloe's thing is she's got lots of site photographs, so you can get an idea as to what she's looking at. So if I zoom in, the first thing that she's got here is basically her pedestrian and public transport map, right, at 1 to 2000. Which and she's got all these different keys here. So basically, where the bus stops are, where the proposed light rail is, these kind of things are the major pedestrian routes. These kind of bubbly things. So basically, this was where the site was. You can tell because it's grey, a different color. But this is how people walk through the city to actually get to the site. Okay. The other thing that she's got here is the vehicle density map. So not only is it about roads and where the cars go, but also which roads carry more cars than others. And she's represented that through the darkness of the color. Okay, so right here the dark yellow is where there's more cars, and when it's more faded, that's when there's less cars. So this again is the site that we were dealing with last semester. So stuff like that you can put in the existing vehicular and pedestrian circulation of the path and surrounds. So really this is similar to exercise 1C, where you're abstracting these kinds of things on the map to show us what we need to know. Yeah. What she's got here also is building typology study. So not only has she gone through and told us where the buildings are, but she's also gone through and told us what kinds of buildings they are: community, residential, government, education, so on and so forth. Now yours is going to be simpler, right? Yours is not going to be as complex as this. Yours will be simpler. And then what she's also got is car parks and existing buildings. It's a more general thing. Okay, so the photographs are the photographs are really important because it points out the things that were important to her on the site. Now, for this site analysis exercise, we won't be going out to the site altogether. I will leave you guys all to make your own way to the site and take pictures and make notes and just get a feel as to what you're looking at. Now, because it's next to the federal highway, what I would suggest is firstly that you go to the site. There's car parking in that hotel, and it's just a grassy field next door that you can walk into. But I would also drive to the other side of the road just so you can get a feel as to how the landscape is, how high it is off the road, is the federal highway going up or down past that, how does it look from the suburbs across, and what might be useful for you guys is to get 2 people in the car and to take, and for the non-driver to be taking pictures of what the site looks like as you're driving past going towards Sydney, and also as you're driving past coming down from Sydney. In particular, I would like you guys to pay attention to this. Well, let me go back to this actually. I would like you guys to pay attention to this particular intersection here. Okay, because what's happening is that we are proposing an ambulance station here. And what I want is for the ambulances to be coming out here, okay? So if they need to go up here, that's fine. They just turn left. If they need to go right, we'll need to make a break in the median strip here so they can get across. Now, with our group, what Karen from the ambulance service told us is that the ambulance station and the fire station has control over the traffic lights that go between the two streets. So Belconnen Way and the next street up. So what happens is that when their alarm goes off, they will press a button which basically stops more cars from coming into that part of the street and turns all the cars that are in front of the station, turns the lights up the road into green, so it'll get rid of all of those cars. Okay, so we can assume that the same thing is going to happen here, and then we'll have a break here. Now, one of the reasons why I chose this site was because it is somewhere which seems to need an ambulance station. So the way you can see it is that this site is really quite a non-urban site at the moment. Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that this area is going to actually be developed in due course. So this is really, our design is a way of influencing what is going to be built there in a way to set the tone of the kind of development that's going to happen. There's a question.
Yeah. When you said we're going to put a break, are we assuming that we already have this happen?
Draw that into your plans. There's no break there right now, so you guys need to design it in. Okay. Now, you see what Chloe has done here is that she's also got sections through the site, so we get an idea as to how the site actually goes, whether it's sloping up and down and what have you. So in her case, in last semester's case, it was quite a gentle slope. All right, but in our case, our site is fairly flat, but there's quite a difference between on the corner between the height of our site and Old Well Station Road. Now, you see what she's also done here is that she's done a sound density, which I've not asked for, so let's not worry about that. But you see, this is a nice little model that she's done here, where she's actually got, you see, this is the site here, where she's actually got coded in terms of volume as well in terms of color as to what the different heights of the buildings are. All right, so this refers back to point 5 on the assignment sheet, where I've asked for existing buildings on the site and surrounds, their heights, use, forms, etc. Now, our site is going to be much simpler than this, and of course that again is because it's 2.2, not 3.1. But this is the kind of thing that you can expect moving on to 3.1. So getting some practice in developing these kinds of drawings is most important. Now, there's many ways of doing solar access, but basically what we need is the site and the sun path in summer, and the sun path in winter, and also what is in shadow. Okay, so this basically gives us an idea as to where we should be putting things that need sun and where we can put things that don't need sun. Okay, so certain parts of the building, like for example the living areas, will probably need sun. So we need to know how these things are actually done on the site. Existing nature, you can see very clearly this is the site that we're dealing with, and then what she's got here is all the trees that are on there. The existing vegetation, which is what I've asked for in point number 2, the floor of the site and the surrounds. These are the constraints, which I haven't given you any constraints, so we don't need to do one of those. And then what she's got here is views and vistas, so what you can see from the site. Okay. Because we're up on a point, this would be important for us in terms of what we can see from our building over the landscape, and also how our building can be seen from the different places in the landscape. Now, any questions? What she's also done here is she's basically done a panorama. So she's taken a series of pictures, click, 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 click. So you get a panorama shot of the site and of the surrounds, so you can actually see what's going on to help you to remember. Okay. So what I might do is show you another one from last year. Which one is this? Okay. So this one is Lauren's one. So you see, it's actually quite different in the way that she's done it. And then, sorry, it must be a monstrous file. So you can see that her colors are different, and she hasn't got so much sort of feathering on the edges of her drawings. So they're much more sort of hard lined, if you like. Yeah, so you can see the way she's got a site and location with everything on it up here. Then she's got a different way of doing the building typologies, and then secondary roads and what have you, existing vegetation, existing buildings and services. So there's many different ways of doing this kind of site analysis type drawings. And this thing is not happy, so I might escape and go back here, which might be easier. And by the way, the reason why these things are difficult to deal with is because all the images are monstrously huge. So when you're doing this kind of thing, make sure that all your images, when you put them into drawings, are at 100% of the size, and that the resolution is no more than 300 dpi. And that will actually allow you to get decent size sort of files, so that this kind of thing doesn't happen. Remember that we look at the hard copies as well as looking at the things on screen, and the easier it is for us to look at these kinds of things, the better it is in terms of grading them. Now let's see. Yep. So you can see here how she's done the wind direction, and she's got wind directions in winter with the dark green. Let me try and zoom in. Holy crap. Okay. Okay, it's decided to... so the wind direction there, you see you've got summer in the light green and winter in the dark green. What's not so good maybe about this diagram is I don't know where it's coming from, and I don't know where it's going to. So when something has direction, remember to give us directional sort of indications. Okay, any questions? Okay, so finally, and I'm going round in circles slightly. What's this one? Let me see if this one actually tells us something more. Okay, so finally, what I'd like to do is just to return back to the case study for a minute, because I've forgotten to do this in the first place. But this was a case study type exercise for Studio 3.1 from last year, where they were doing a big library and theatre complex. So yours obviously is going to be much smaller, but you can see here that they put in pictures of the case study, so we can see what it looks like. But in the plan, you can see that the plan is divided into blue bits and white bits. Okay, so in the same way, what we might actually think about it in this way. These are the kinds of colors they're doing, but they are doing it in terms of a library and over a plan. Okay, so you can see very clearly what is the two different kinds of spaces that they are exploring there over a number of levels. All right, so every level needs to have its own kind of plan. They've also done it in section to explain how this happens in section. Now, just to go back to what I said before, we certainly do not need to have these base drawings. It makes things easier if we have these base drawings, but we can also come up with our own diagrams just from looking at roof plans and looking at elevations and things. So we can cobble our own things together from scale drawings that we have. These things do not need to be of an accurate scale, but it will be good to have an idea as to roughly how big these things are. And of course, on Google Earth, you have the ruler function, so you can actually measure how big a building is going to be if you don't have plans. Okay, and also please use your detective skills. This is much like those kind of CSI type TV series on the whereby you need to use your powers of observation, I can't even speak anymore, to actually figure out how big everything is, right? So when you're looking at a fire station and it's got 10 fire trucks in there, then you've got an idea as to how big a bay needs to be, and you can work out backwards as to how big the actual building is. Are there any questions on the case study? Okay, so just to sum up, we've got the case study. We're clear on what the return brief is, and we're now clear on the site analysis, and we know how to go and look at the ACT-MAPI to get more information, or to get more detailed information. Yeah, and I've loaded the site information, what I've got so far, onto a folder called site information in Moodle under week 5. Any more questions? All done, all finished? Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.